When Loretta Lynn released her recording of Stand By Your Man, all of Nashville assumed she was simply covering a classic. No one imagined that Loretta was singing her own life, one bound to the worst husband fate could have handed a 15-year-old girl. For years, that truth stayed buried, hidden behind stage lights and a long string of #1 hits. Only when Loretta wrote her memoir did the darkest secret finally surface. The worst thing Lynn ever did to her, and it was far more horrifying than anything country music had ever dared to confess. Loretta Lynn wasn't just a superstar with dozens of awards and hundreds of songs. She was a survivor of a marriage marked by violence, betrayal, and fights that ended with shattered glass on the floor, muffled sobs, and missing teeth. Long before Hollywood, her life was already dramatic enough to become Coal Miner's Daughter, a film that swept award season simply because her real tragedies were more brutal than anything a screenwriter would dare put on the page. The powerful voice, the fiery songs, the glittering career, that was only half the story. The other half, raw, painful, chaotic, and unforgivingly honest, was what turned Loretta Lynn into a legend. A woman who rose from her deepest wounds to tell the story no one else had the courage to tell. To understand how Loretta could stand in the middle of the storm, marriage, fame, and a lifetime of layered wounds without collapsing, you have to turn back to the first pages of her life, where a child too young to dream had already learned to endure, bit by bit. Loretta Webb was born on April 14, 1932, in the mountains of Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, in a wooden cabin so cold that in winter, the family glued pages torn from a Sears catalog onto the walls as a makeshift shield against the mountain winds. 8 mouths crowded into a space so small that a single heavy breath could make the whole place tremble. The meager pay of her coal miner father, a job both brutal and deadly, barely bought simple meals, never comfort, and certainly never a warm winter. Each time he returned from the mines, his body was coated in black dust, as if he had just crawled out of the earth itself. His breathing was so strained that Loretta could hear every rasp, each one sounding like a countdown to the day Black Lung, the curse of all miners, would take him at age 52. In that sagging kitchen, where the fire flickered weakly and night winds seeped through the wooden cracks, Loretta grew up to the soundtrack of hardship. The scrape of coal shovels, the whistle of wind over the roof, her mother silently stretching every penny, and the quiet ache of a child who understood far too early that the world offered her no special favor. She learned guitar on an old hand-me-down instrument from a neighbor, practiced singing with the rough Appalachian tones of the mountain people, and held on to the weary yet unbreakable look in her mother's eyes. A woman fighting poverty as if letting go for even 1 second would send the entire family over the edge. Poverty didn't break Loretta. What frightened her was the feeling of being trapped in those mountains, where the future was as tightly shut as the warped wooden door on their porch, where children grew up only to repeat their father's lives, and no one ever got the chance to step farther. Her childhood held no choices, only long days of resignation, sleepless nights filled with her father's coughing, meals so thin everyone rationed each bite, and a single wish quietly threading itself through her heart: to escape, by any means necessary, even if it meant trading her youth for a way out. And from that coal dust-shrouded land, where hardship seeped into the skin like part of one's fate, the road that would lead Loretta Lynn to her fateful marriage at 15 began to form. A turning point that carried both light and darkness. A chance to leave Butcher Hollow, but also the first cut in a journey of blood, tears, and music that would follow her for the rest of her life. The longing to escape the mountains, once so distant it felt unreal, finally took on shape when Loretta met Oliver Lynn. He was 6 years older, strong in a way that unsettles a 15-year-old girl, and fierce in a way she would remember for the rest of her life. Their small wedding happened quickly. No white dress, no ceremony, just a key that unlocked the door out of Butcher Hollow. Washington greeted them with pine forests, logging camps, and a life both wider and far more unpredictable than anything Loretta had ever known. In their tiny shack in the logging camps, Dew saw something Loretta herself had not dared to confront. Her Appalachian voice was more than a pastime for evenings by the stove. He brought home a $17 guitar he bought from Sears, the most valuable thing in their house at the time, and pushed her to practice every chord, every line, every trembling note. He believed in the music she carried from the Kentucky mountains, even when Loretta herself believed in nothing except the duties of a wife far too young. The shift began on a small stage in Tacoma. A local televised talent show, seemingly trivial, exposed her raw, unpolished, haunting voice to the camera. Her prize was only a wristwatch, worthless to a family barely getting by, but it was destiny's first touch. A certain Norm Burley heard her voice through the TV and was so stunned that he did something no one expected. He founded an entire record label just to sign Loretta. The drive toward Hollywood felt like hurling a mountain girl into the heart of the American dream. In that tiny studio, Loretta recorded "I'm a Honky-Tonk Girl," a bare, straight-talking song about women abandoned between bar rooms and broken hearts. It felt too real, too lived in, as if the listener were reading the private diary of a young wife worn down by life. But those beautiful master tapes meant nothing if no one heard them. Dew mailed 3,500 copies to radio stations across America. No replies, no encouragement. Nothing but silence. That silence drove the two of them into the most reckless decision of their lives. Driving across the country, sleeping slumped in the back seat, splitting sandwiches, and hand-delivering each record to each station, begging them to play it just once. The story became country music legend. A mountain-born voice, a stubborn husband, an exhausted car, and endless nights with nothing ahead except hope. And while Nashville was still a distant dream, the Billboard charts suddenly ranked "I'm a Honky-Tonk Girl" at number 14. No one understood better than Loretta that this was not just a number. It was proof that her Appalachian voice had opened a door no one thought could open. The invitation from the Grand Ole Opry arrived soon after, a final confirmation that the girl who once glued pages from a Sears catalog to keep out the cold had now stepped into country music's holiest stage. The great artists listened to her sing and were immediately pulled in by that unadorned, truth-telling sound, so honest it could sting. The moment Loretta set foot on the Opry stage was the moment she stepped out of the shadows of her childhood and into a new life. A life where she could sing on behalf of millions of American women, even while she herself was still living inside a storm of a marriage, with each future song becoming another scar carved from her own pain. Loretta's appearance at the Grand Ole Opry pulled her into the heart of Nashville, but it also placed her under a new set of constraints. When she signed with Wilburn Brothers Publishing, she believed she was joining a musical family built on trust. The truth turned out very differently. Papers she signed hastily back when she was still inexperienced bound all of her songwriting rights to someone else: recording rights, publishing rights, reprint rights, even the right to decide who could sing her songs. Every song she wrote, every note she shaped from her Appalachian memories, fell instantly into a system where she was just a name on the contract, not the owner. By the time Loretta realized what had happened, everything had already been locked behind clauses so tight that lawyers told her, "You can't win." Nashville praised her talent, but the city itself erected an invisible wall that kept her from controlling her own creations. Later, Loretta refused to stay quiet. She taught herself copyright law, reading dry pages night after her shows, cross-checking every clause against what had been taken from her. When negotiations failed, she went straight to the record label, demanded the right to re-record her own material, and refused to let any new songs fall into the Wilburns' hands. At the height of the conflict, she even had to stop releasing her own compositions in order to force a renegotiation. It was a near-suicidal choice in Nashville, an artist whose livelihood depends on songs suddenly unable to release songs. But Loretta understood that sacrificing her career temporarily was still better than letting her life's work belong to someone else forever. The battle lasted more than 3 decades. Loretta won back her rights piece by piece: recording rights, control over future material, and the ability to place her music in films and compilations. Not everything, but enough for her to reclaim her identity as a creator, someone who determines the fate of her own art. The fight cast a long shadow over half her career, yet it made her one of the first female artists to stand up to Nashville's publishing machinery. Even as the backstage battles simmered, the stage itself began to blaze in a different way. Decca Records recognized the true power of that Appalachian voice. Success, 1962, marked a turning point. The first time Loretta stood on the charts as an artist in her own right. Not just a mountain girl who happened to be discovered, but a storyteller with a distinct voice. Her career widened, even as her life grew heavier with the birth of twins Peggy and Patsy. The struggle of raising children in poverty, combined with Dew's increasingly volatile moods, formed the emotional ground from which Loretta wrote Dear Uncle Sam, 1966, a song about a woman watching her husband walk off to war, wrapped in fear, sacrifice, and the hollow ache of a closing door. Country music had never heard a song so raw, so breath-stealingly honest, and audiences realized that Loretta Lynn didn't just sing well, she spoke the pain of an entire generation. At 34, Loretta became a grandmother, a milestone that stunned Nashville. A rising star, a woman who had barely lived her own youth, a mother of 6, and now suddenly a grandmother. Her life always moved faster than any rule book, any expectation, any ordinary rhythm. Dew decided they needed a bigger place, a home, a studio, a refuge where Loretta could breathe amid the crushing schedules. They found a rundown property in Tennessee, unaware that to buy the house, they also had to buy an entire small town called Hurricane Mills. From that patch of wilderness, Loretta built the center of her world, a home, a workplace, and later a pilgrimage site for country fans. A town saved by the voice of a woman who once only dreamed of escaping the mountains. As her marriage grew more painful, Loretta's music grew sharper, bolder, almost bare. You Ain't Woman Enough, 1967, established her as a fearless storyteller. The song topped the charts, not just because it was catchy, but because it was the shield of a woman betrayed too many times for too long. No woman in country had ever written about jealousy with such power and honesty. That fire erupted fully in Fist City, 1968, a warning shot to women who flirted with Dew. The song was so blunt, so ferocious, that many radio stations banned it, afraid their audiences couldn't handle the truth Loretta was singing. Behind the scenes, producers were unsettled. On stage, American women rose to applaud her, as if Loretta were shouting what they had never dared to say. Her later songs carried even more of the fractures of her marriage: suspicion, disappointment, abandonment, Dew's drunken rages, the smashed furniture, the nights he disappeared. Loretta turned every crack in her private life into a song, so honest it needed no polishing. Those songs made her the voice of Southern women, women who had never had anyone speak for them. That was when Nashville realized Loretta Lynn was not just a rising star. She was a rule breaker, a truth teller, a woman who stood on stage and turned personal tragedy into a force that changed an entire genre. But Loretta's rebellion in music didn't just catch Nashville's attention. It brought her into a friendship no country autobiography could ever overlook. One fateful broadcast, when Loretta sang "I Fall to Pieces" live on the radio, her voice reached the ears of the woman she admired most, Patsy Cline. Patsy was recovering from a serious car crash, unable to perform, but able to hear every note Loretta sang, as if someone were voicing her own emotions. Moved to tears, she asked her husband to drive to the station and bring Loretta home. Their first meeting happened in Patsy's small living room, where a bandaged country diva sat across from a shy mountain girl carrying both awe and the deep insecurity that had followed her since childhood. From that moment, Nashville witnessed a rare friendship between two women who lived on opposite edges of the same world. One, a fully formed star, glamorous, dazzling; the other, a mountain-born newcomer, still raw and bewildered by a prematurely shortened youth. Patsy saw in Loretta a primal, unfiltered voice. Loretta saw in Patsy a kind of protection she had never known, not even from her husband. Their friendship quickly deepened into something so intimate that Nashville whispered about it, while Loretta saw Patsy as the one person who taught her how to survive the spotlight without losing her soul. Patsy adjusted her posture, corrected her stance, lent her stage clothes, taught her how to face an audience and men in an industry built on control and pressure. Loretta remembered how Patsy would spread dresses across the living room floor, making her walk back and forth on them as if shaping a rough stone into a diamond with edges and elegance. They helped each other in ways rare in the business, honestly, without jealousy, without calculation. Patsy defended Loretta against difficult producers. Loretta listened to things Patsy couldn't tell anyone else. On quiet evenings in the kitchen, Patsy brewed coffee, Loretta sang through new lines, and both would burst into laughter when Loretta's Appalachian inflections made everything too real for the market. Their closeness reached the point where even odd gifts became symbols of their bond. Patsy giving Loretta old clothes, makeup, personal items that only truly close women would share. Not because Loretta was poor, but because Patsy wanted her to feel she deserved care, deserved affection. People around them saw something remarkable. Since becoming close to Patsy, Loretta grew bolder in her writing, braver in confronting the tragedies of her marriage, firmer in her voice. Patsy encouraged her to fight unfair contracts, taught her how to negotiate, how to protect her worth in an industry full of traps. Then came the darkest moment Loretta never truly recovered from. The plane carrying Patsy Cline out of Nashville never arrived. News of Patsy's death in 1963 hit Loretta like a strike of lightning. A woman who had just found her first sister, lost to her too quickly, too cruelly. Loretta later said that for a long time afterward, every time she stepped onto a stage, she felt something missing, like the presence Patsy once brought simply by standing near a microphone, watching her with pride. Nashville lost a historic voice. Loretta lost the only person who had taught her how to exist in that world. Patsy Cline's death carved a wound into Loretta's career. Her later songs grew fiercer, truer, heavier with grief and loneliness no one could ease. The friendship ended abruptly, but its influence stayed with Loretta Lynn her entire life, from her voice to her stage presence to the strength she rebuilt from what Patsy left behind. If there was one woman who helped turn Loretta into the Loretta Lynn the world came to know, it was always Patsy. Not by blood, by fire, by loss, by love. Patsy's death didn't push Loretta backward. It pushed her forward with a will so fierce, even Nashville learned to keep its distance. Once grief had shaped both her voice and her character, Loretta began receiving titles that had previously been reserved for men. Pioneer, rule breaker, the voice of Southern women. Her songs no longer simply expressed emotion. They questioned a woman's right to be angry, to be sad, to walk away in a conservative society. What made Loretta the most powerful figure in country music wasn't statistics. It was the realization among millions of women that when they listened to her, they heard themselves. Her impact grew so strong that major brands began to view Loretta as the embodiment of authenticity. Crisco invited her to become their brand ambassador, a strange but perfect move for the moment. Loretta's image standing in the kitchen with a frying pan didn't make her ordinary. It reminded audiences that the woman topping the charts had once scraped by in a poor Kentucky kitchen, raising children during years when money couldn't buy meat. Those ads turned Loretta into an American symbol, grounded, strong, unashamed of her roots. Her career soared further when Nashville did something it had never done for a woman before, naming her Artist of the Decade at the end of the 1970s. ACM had never awarded the title to a woman, but they had no choice. Hit after hit, dominance on radio, fearless lyricism, and overwhelming cultural influence forced critics to acknowledge Loretta Lynn as a voice country music could not survive without. It wasn't just a professional victory. It marked the moment a girl from Appalachia stepped fully into her role as the genre's unofficial queen. Hollywood took notice. In the early 1980s, Universal adapted Coal Miner's Daughter into a film, and Loretta herself set the first stone by choosing Sissy Spacek. Not because of looks, but because something in her intuition said only Spacek could hold both the weariness and the fire inside her. As soon as Spacek accepted, she didn't review the script. She went straight to Kentucky, shadowing Loretta on tour, watching how she gripped a microphone, how her breath changed when she spoke about her father, how her Appalachian tone sharpened when she was tired. Every small movement Loretta made became something Spacek carefully absorbed with obsessive craftsmanship. The transformation wouldn't be complete without a man of stark contrast, Tommy Lee Jones as Dew. The similarities between Jones and the real Dew made the set tense more than once. Loretta struggled with watching another man reenact the worst sides of her husband, while Jones refused to soften the character. Tension eased only after a night when Jones invited Loretta out for local moonshine, driving a battered Jeep down the hills as if they were outrunning all the unnamed burdens life had placed on them. In a rare moment, Loretta admitted she saw Dew in Jones's eyes. Not the rage, but the small, beautiful part that had held their marriage together for so many years. When the film premiered, Hollywood immediately understood this wasn't a routine biopic. Coal Miner's Daughter opened with $3.6 million, a strong figure for a character-based film at the time, and shot straight into the Oscar race. 7 Academy Award nominations, 4 Golden Globes, and Sissy Spacek's historic wins at both ceremonies transformed the Appalachian story into cultural myth. From that moment on, Loretta's legacy no longer lived only on radio, on vinyl, or the Opry stage. She became a figure framed inside American cinema history. And Hollywood, by telling her life to the world, did something Loretta had never dared imagine. It turned the bruises, the arguments, the marital wounds, and the grit of a coal miner's daughter into cultural heritage, a story that needed no embellishment, because Loretta Lynn's real life always outstripped any script. The explosion of Coal Miner's Daughter didn't slow Loretta down. When the studio lights dimmed, she returned to the stage at a pace that astonished her peers. 1 album a year, sometimes 2. each project carrying the breath of Appalachia and the hand of a woman who had lived long enough to know exactly what made listeners' hearts ache. While many of her contemporaries struggled to stay relevant, Loretta remained steady. Her tours stretched across America, into Canada, and across Europe. Every city welcomed her as the emblem of an older America, one where acoustic strings and honest stories mattered more than LED lights. Behind those endless road trips, her family weathered more storms. Children growing up in the shadow of fame, Du's health declining, old age casting its weight over a marriage already cracked. Even so, Loretta kept working as if the stage were the only place she still controlled the world. Her new albums didn't just record life, each felt like a diary entry she didn't dare write down. Just when it seemed Loretta had said everything she could say creatively, an unexpected meeting changed everything. Jack White, the rebellious rock figure of the 2000s, saw in Loretta not an aging legend, but a fire that had never gone out. Their collaboration drew a wave of curiosity. A country singer born in 1932 teaming up with a rock icon young enough to be her grandson. Van Lear Rose was born from that electrifying clash. Jack White kept the raw texture of Loretta's voice, but placed it against gritty, jagged instrumentation. He didn't smooth the age from her breath or soften her lived-in phrasing. He preserved her essence and let younger listeners hear what older ones had always known: honesty that cut like bone. The album hit #2 on the Billboard Country chart, earned overwhelming critical acclaim, and became one of the boldest country projects of the modern era. No one expected a nearly 70-year-old artist to make the entire world stop and listen as if she were brand new. That resurgence brought Loretta back to the center of American culture. Lifetime Achievement Awards from CMA, AMA, and the Grammys followed. Each time she stepped on stage to accept one, she carried the presence of someone who knew fame meant nothing without stories worth telling. People began calling her a new name, the spiritual mother of modern country. A recognition that every woman who ever walked onto a country stage carried something of her courage, her scars, her victories. And, like coal dust carried on an Appalachian wind, Loretta's voice continued to exist, not just in her recordings, but in the very way an entire genre learned to tell the truth, the way she once did. Songs about war, about the fear of losing a husband, about quiet wounds that never heal. All of them revealed one truth. Loretta Lynn did not write from imagination, but from a marriage full of sharp edges. Every time she stepped into the studio, she carried with her a story that began the day she met Oliver Doolittle Lynn on the front porch of a poor wooden cabin in Butcher Hollow. Do was 9 years older, a recently discharged soldier with the confident air of a man who had walked roads a coal miner's daughter could not yet imagine. His intensity drew Loretta in immediately. In a place so poor that dreams were considered luxuries, Do's attention felt like a promise that her life could turn another direction. Married at 15, Loretta thought she was stepping into a new home. In reality, she was entering a world of contradictions, a man who would become both her launching pad and her longest-lasting wound. Do took Loretta out of Kentucky to Washington, opening a future she had never dared to dream of. He was the first to recognize her talent, buying a $17 Sears guitar when their pockets held only a few crumpled bills, and he pushed her to sing, to practice, to let the world hear that fiery Appalachian voice. Do helped her onto her first stage, urged her to join a talent show, and it was his force of will that carried them to Hollywood to record I'm a Honky-Tonk Girl, laying the foundation of her entire career. But as the marriage unfolded, cracks began to show. Loretta slowly realized that her love for Doolittle was not a straight path, but rough, terrain, where promises and pain lived side by side like two faces of a coin. The man who lifted her onto the stage was also the man who brought nights reeking of alcohol, sudden disappearances, and jealous outbursts that left Loretta unsure what she would face whenever she opened the front door. Each show ended in applause. Loretta returned to a silent kitchen where dues, remorse mixed with a familiar cycle. Mistake, apology, repeat. She didn't write to take revenge. She wrote to breathe. You ain't woman enough. Fist City. Don't come home a-drinkin'. They were her way of recording pain in the only language she knew, music. The family they tried to build never had a solid foundation. Loretta became a mother at 16, then gave birth to 5 more children within a decade. A small house, too many kids, an unpredictable husband, a punishing tour schedule, all of it pushed Loretta to exhaustion while she still had to stand tall. One arm holding a child, the other gripping a microphone, her heart trying to hold together a marriage that was crumbling a little more with every trip on the road. As Loretta became famous, Doolittle wrestled with a conflict he never resolved. Pride in having seen her talent from the start, and fear that fame might pull her out of his reach. That chaos cast long shadows over the Lynn children. Ernest slipped into drinking, and Peggy grew up feeling that her mother belonged more to the stage than to home. Jack Benny was the child who made Loretta believe every sacrifice was worth it, a strong, gentle boy who adored his mother. Until the day he rode his horse toward the river and never returned. The news in 1984 shattered Loretta completely. She canceled tours, stopped singing, locked the ranch gates, and lived in silence for months, as if every sound awakened the roar of the water that swallowed her son. Before that wound could heal, Betty Sue died of lung disease in 2013, leaving Loretta with another emptiness. Not the grief of a mother losing her child, but of a woman who spent her life running between stage and home, yet still could not protect everything she loved. Yet even in the deepest chaos, Loretta's love for Doolittle never faded. When he collapsed under the weight of illness, it was Loretta who sat by his bedside for years. She prepared every meal, supported him step by step, carried him through each treatment and surgery. That love wasn't easy forgiveness. It was the kind of bond that can only exist between two people who have survived too many fractures to ever walk away from each other. When Doolittle died in 1996, Loretta lost not only her husband, but the most original part of her memory. The ranch grew larger, quieter, as if every room held the echo of a past chaos they had lived through together. Loretta never loved anyone but Doolittle. It was both a painful confession and a truth etched into her for nearly half a century. Their marriage had no golden frame, no polished ending. It existed like a southern kind of love, rough, intense, full of contradictions, yet loyal enough that those inside it carried it until the end of their lives. And from that chaos, Loretta Lynn's music was born. Honest, sharp, unfiltered, powerful enough to turn a coal miner's daughter into a country legend, and to leave inside her spaces that could never be filled. In the years after Doolittle passed, Hurricane Mills, the small town they had purchased together in 1966, became Loretta's final refuge. When the stage lights dimmed, Loretta still refused to sit still. She kept writing, recording, and pouring into her late-career albums a kind of gentle strength that only comes from someone who has lived through too much loss. Then one evening in May 2017, inside her bedroom at the ranch, Loretta suddenly collapsed from a stroke. The news cut through Nashville like a blade. No one imagined that the woman with nearly superhuman endurance could be brought down by her own body. She survived, but her voice slowed. Her steps lost their steadiness. The months of recovery passed in silence. No guitar, no phone calls about tours. Before her health could stabilize, another blow struck in early 2018. Loretta fell and fractured her hip. For a singer nearing 90, it wasn't just an injury. It was a warning that her time on stage had reached its final chapter. Loretta understood this, yet she refused to let fear suffocate her. She continued recording her last tracks, creating Still Woman Enough, a declaration that time may defeat the body, but it cannot defeat the spirit. On October 4th, 2022, Loretta Lynn passed away in her sleep at the very ranch house she had called home for more than half a century. No grand farewells, no long final message. Her death was like a country ballad, quiet, honest, unadorned, yet it left an emptiness larger than any stage she had ever stood on. The news swept through the music world within hours. Young country artists called her the spiritual mother of the genre. The remaining legends bowed their heads in respect for a woman who had turned arguments, marital scars, poverty, and the devastating loss of her children into immortal songs. Hurricane Mills became a pilgrimage site, and her old recordings rose again, as if Loretta were somewhere nearby, standing on the Grand Ole Opry stage for the first time, brushing her fingers across guitar strings, singing like she had never known fear. People say she lived nearly 90 years, but her legacy, her voice, her story, her resilience, will live far beyond any generation alive today. Loretta Lynn ended her life with the peace she had searched for all along. The bitter truth is that this peace only arrived after every wound had etched itself into her music, leaving the world of country with one final truth. She was not just a legend. She was proof that even the most wounded heart can create songs that soothe the pain of an entire generation. Loretta Lynn's legacy doesn't lie in the number of albums sold or the endless shelves of awards in the display room at Hurricane Mills. Her true value lies in the way she reshaped the entire country landscape using nothing but uncomfortable truth. The cuts inside a marriage, Appalachian poverty, the ache of ordinary women Nashville once avoided. Before Loretta, country music belonged to men singing about drinking and dusty highways. After Loretta, women finally had a voice unafraid of blunt honesty, unafraid of making listeners uncomfortable, unafraid to sing about infidelity, jealousy, war, loneliness in the kitchen, or the sleepless nights waiting for a husband to come home. Things radio stations once labeled not suitable for the public. Loretta's music opened the door for the next generations to name their own pain. Tammy Wynette could sing about heartbreak, Dolly Parton could sing about freedom, and Miranda Lambert and Carrie Underwood could take the microphone and channel the fury of Southern women, all because they stood on the foundation Loretta had shattered open with her own life. Nashville owes her that shift, a restructuring of how songs were written, how music was heard, and how a woman was seen on stage. But Loretta's influence didn't end with music. Through her persistence against restrictive contracts, she forced Nashville to confront the issue of publishing rights, a dark corner where hundreds of artists before her had been trapped. Her 3-decade battle became a lesson for the entire industry, an Appalachian woman studying copyright law during late-night tours, freeing her own creative children from a system built on owning the artist, not respecting them. Because of Loretta, exploitative contracts became much harder to hide. Her entire life was also a reminder of endurance, swallowed by poverty as a child, worn down by marriage, losing her son in a tragedy, losing her daughter to illness, losing the man who had both lifted her and hurt her for nearly half a century. Yet Loretta still stood on stage, still sang as if music were the only thing keeping her from drowning. Audiences saw themselves in her, strong but not perfect, wounded but unbroken. Hurricane Mills, the place where she lived and died, is more than a ranch. It has become country music's sacred ground. People go there to touch the old wooden house, sit on the benches Loretta once swept, stand by the river where Jack Benny was lost, and realize that every part of that land carries a piece of her story. No museum is as raw or haunting as that place. Loretta Lynn left the world more than 160 songs, hundreds of stages lit bright, and millions of people who found themselves inside that Appalachian voice. But her greatest legacy isn't the music. It's the fact that Loretta proved that truth, no matter how violent, ugly, or painful, can become immortal art. She didn't just change country music, she changed the place of women within country music. And that will live on long after the last notes of Loretta Lynn fade into the memories of the next generation. Loretta Lynn sang about pain as if it were part of her body. Rough, raw, and entirely unhidden. That honesty saved her through the stormiest years, and it saved country music from sinking into safe triviality. A 15-year-old girl who stepped out of Kentucky coal dust, loved through chaos, lived among wounds, yet left behind an irreplaceable legacy. The power of a woman brave enough to say the things she feared most. What makes Loretta Lynn truly great isn't just the songs she left behind. It's the way her voice still makes people recognize themselves in it. Do you remember the last time you listened to Coal Miner's Daughter and fell quiet at every line? Share that moment in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe so stories like Loretta's continue to be told, warming the hearts of those who need them for a very long time to come.